Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Michael Woods, founder of Inclusive Sport Design. Welcome to the Sport is for Everybody podcast, where we talk all things inclusion in sport with amazing guests who are out there making it happen. We are recording on beautiful Gundungurra country, so I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Gundungurra people and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also pay my respects and welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and all other Indigenous and First Nations peoples who are watching or listening in today. In this episode, I talk with Toby Kable about approaches to adaptive sport for people with disability. Now, Toby is an accomplished special education teacher who excels at creating inclusive sporting environments. He has a long history of coaching adaptive sports, and for over 10 years, he's successfully run his sole trader business, All Ability Sports Coaching, to increase local opportunities for his players in the Newcastle region. Toby also teaches inclusive PDHPE education and adaptations for inclusion in sport and physical education at the University of Newcastle, a role he has held for 8 years. And most recently, Toby has been appointed the Oceania representative for the International Federation of Adaptive Physical Activity. This episode, we discuss adaptive and disability sports, focusing on inclusive practices and Toby's work with All Ability Sports Coaching, as well as the innovative speed of play concept for categorizing participants, particularly in team sports. So it's a really interesting model, one which I think you'll find very interesting. And Toby also shares his insights on coaching, athlete engagement, as well as his work with the University of Newcastle. We also cover the impact of inclusive sports programs and the importance of mindset in inclusive practice. And as always, stick around to the end for Toby's top inclusion tip. Alrighty, let's get into it. Toby Kable, welcome to the Sport is for Everybody podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, mate. I really appreciate the opportunity.
No worries. I'm really excited about digging into some of the work that you've been doing and some of your ideas, which I think our listeners will get a huge amount of value from. So we're going to talk about, adaptive sport, disability sport, and some of the work that you've been doing in that space over the last few years. But I guess for a bit of context, you and I, we connected recently at and I'm going to get this right, the International Sports Summit and Think Tank that was hosted by Sport Inclusion Australia up in Brisbane, which was run alongside the Athletics Virtus World Championships for athletics up there. So yeah, it was a great opportunity. So I'm keen to first of all, I'm going to throw a little curveball at you. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but yeah, keen to get your initial thoughts on how that summit went and what you thought about it.
Oh, mate, it was a wonderful experience. And I remember walking away from that just thinking our world is getting bigger. It's one of those things that I think for a lot of us, we're working in a smaller, isolated kind of pocket or in our niche discipline or classification of sport. So to be just surrounded by so many people that are on the ground and are in advocacy roles and creating opportunity roles, it was inspiring. But I also took a lot out of the connections and like yourself, this kind of onflow of opportunity that's spread from those connections. And I think that's a really powerful part of all the extra conversations that come off the back of it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And I think one of the takeaways for me was around the opportunity and the breadth of engagement across the sports sector with government, local government, sport organisations, disability sector, and as well, and this is something that I think Sport Inclusion Australia does really well, is actually, athlete engagement. We had perspectives from athletes as well, sharing their experiences as well as their ideas and things that they need from people like us who are delivering activity and the practitioners in decision makers in sport. So yeah, it was a really great opportunity. And like you say, conversations lead to connections lead to other things, and here we are today. So yeah, once again, really, really glad to have you here and looking forward to our chat. I want to, first of all, give you the chance to acknowledge to First Nations peoples, the lands that you're on. We're here on Gundungurra country, so obviously, where are you?
So we're up Newcastle Lake Macquarie Way, which is a Wabakal lands and Warramai land. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us What do you do? Tell us about your roles in sport. I know you've got a few hats that you wear, and we're going to dig into some of your specific work, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in inclusive sport.
Well, my background, I guess, I'm a special education teacher by trade, and we started many years ago volunteering in sport for people with intellectual disability through Special Olympics cricket. From there, I guess we started into a small business because we had multiple sports that we were trying to do, and not all of them aligned under one pathway or one system. And we were finding that for a lot of our opportunity, we had to travel away just to get a game of sport, where if we had turned it into a small business, we could still provide that weekly training, but also a weekly sport. And I guess that's really where it all started. But that initial love of inclusion and disability sport probably was shaped from years of working in schools and working with adults with disability in kind of service provider land. And you can see that natural love of sport. Everyone's got their favourite teams and their favourite players, and just that will and that want to play the game and experience success and have a win. So we were able to facilitate that at a local level, and obviously it's kind of expanding out from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And all of us tend to have that work in, particularly in disability sport, but broadly in the DEI space within sport. There's usually a reason we do it. It's usually a motivation or a set of experiences or happenstances that sort of lead us down the path somewhat. And, I've spoken about that on the podcast before, and a lot of our guests have shared sort of some of their backstory about how they came to be working in the space. What's your motivation? Why do you do the work?
I guess for starters, I'm a country kid. I grew up in a little place called Hay out in the Riverina. So small isolated community, 2,500. You grow up loving sport and community and traveling for sport, and the pride of representing this little patch of dirt that most people might not be aware of, but how much it means to you and how much pride that has. But also when you take down towns that are 5 to 10 times the size of you, there was always a fair bit of underdog mentality in that. And I guess in small country towns, that pride of place, so it still sits with me now. And I guess we see that in how we represent our community and what that means to us. So I guess that's a starting point. When I was 19, I was in a motor vehicle accident where I sustained a fractured skull and bleeding on the brain. And I moved to Newcastle for rehabilitation. And I guess there's long lasting impacts of that head trauma. And I guess that's really where that foundation of speed of play, which is our kind of model, our framing of how we look and see everything is based off that lived experience of that going through that rehabilitation process. Anyone that's had head trauma, you sleep a lot, and there's a lot of kind of recovery time in that. But for myself personally, even just like the first 2 years was, these new epiphanies. I'd be calling my wife going, oh, look, I just remembered this, and I just remembered that, and going through these kind of relearning processes, and there's
relearning how to use your body and how to
some fun stories, but probably not for here to share with all of those, but relearning to drive a manual. But anyway, there was things like that, and I guess for myself, that awareness of the task complexity and whether I was having success at that point or not. And I could see those gradual changes occurring. And I guess that mindset and that approach, I'm just very aware of. And even still to this day, even with all the different types of amazing work I get to do, there's certain elements in my life that I still need to spend more time on to be able to achieve that task where others can maybe fly through that. So that kind of lived experience was always front and center in my mind when working with other people, because I can see that tension or friction point. And obviously there's a way to work around those things where we get to truly enjoy the experience and gain from the experience. And for myself, I've been able to grow and achieve so much off the back of just framing activities and challenges and my work in a way where I can achieve those things without necessarily feeling like I'm not able to because of that extra time it takes sometimes to get certain things done. Generally writing emails and planning sessions. They're my two burners, those ones.
Yeah. Yeah, right. No, it's sort of, it really highlights, and we talk about this a lot in the podcast. We talk about this a lot in general in terms of the work that we do, but that having that lived experience in the planning and delivery of sport for people with disability, impairment, additional support needs, etc. Like, it's critical, right? Because it brings a level of understanding as well as new concepts and new ways of doing things that people that don't have that lived experience are just never going to conceive of, right? So the ability for you to bring that experience into your work and share that with others, I think, is hugely valuable. So I'm glad that you got through that, difficult part of your life, and you're really, doing some amazing things. And we're going to dig into the speed of play concept that you've mentioned in a little bit. That's probably the main reason why we've got you on the podcast, to share your ideas around that, which I find really fascinating. But before we do, you also teach, right? So you're also sharing your knowledge and experience through a role at University of Newcastle. So tell us about that.
So I've been very fortunate. I feel like these sliding doors types of moments, through the success I was having with our local program at the time, it probably brought a bit of awareness with some of the representative coaching appointments I was having. And then that kind of got the University of Newcastle was bringing back in their adaptations for inclusion in sport module back into some of their coursework for undergraduate teachers, or future teachers, so primary, secondary, and early childhood. And I kind of started just with that small piece of coursework that I've created and adapted, and a lot of that will fall back into the systems and models that we've created and actively use week in, week out with our community. And so, working with future teachers, sometimes it'll be with first and second year, sometimes they'll have it as an elective course in that kind of third and fourth year. And a lot of the time just trying to promote inclusive education in PDHPE, personal development, health and physical education. And and obviously it's always a win when you have those that choose that path or that calling to go into special education and want to take that as an elective in their final year. But just a lot of the time we frame a lot of that coursework still just around inclusive practice within a mainstream setting, knowing that not all teachers are necessarily going to go to that classroom of 6 to 12 students.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's always going to be that scope of speed of play within every classroom you ever teach. And it's not always going to be the visual, obvious stuff, but thinking about purposeful adaptations, what's working, what's not working, and how to do that with, in a really, human-based way with that person-first approach.
Yeah, no, it's great to see some of that. Yeah, that adaptive, inclusive coaching practice or teaching practice or, what have you, coming into these mainstream university degrees more and more. Do you, have you seen any impacts from those teachers going out into the world and taking those skills with them? What sort of impact do you see that work making? Because I think it's really important.
Yeah, look, I think there's a broad scope in terms of for some of the future teachers we're working with, maybe they've had a really negative experience with PE. So it's more that kind of softening and opening up and seeing that there's a more inclusive way, which then brings them on board to have the confidence and competence to deliver. But it's not uncommon for us to have future teachers that are already out there coaching. So a lot of the time, there's certain adaptations that are promoting inclusion and really just getting the best out of their playing group, whether that is a mainstream elite pathway side and you've got people coming up into that fringe or they're doing, working in USH centres and with that wide age group spread and things like that. So sometimes it's just little strategies of adaptations that get to a game or activity where it works and it's fun and it's engaging and more people get to enjoy it versus the standard 2 or 3 who are just are of a higher speed of play than everybody else. So you occasionally you'll get those students coming back the following week going, I tried this adaptation and it worked. And so, and once smaller ones that you get to bump into later on where it's like, off the back of that course, I chose special ed and I wouldn't be going back type of thing. So that's always, when you see that positive impact.
Yeah, that's right. And we talk a lot about the idea that good teachers, good coaches, good, sport leaders, instructors are by their nature inclusive, right? And so we need those skills to be transferred to them at, the early points of contact in their degrees or in their training or what have you. Because I know for me, and I talk about this in sort of the intro episode 0 of the podcast, is like that wasn't in the curriculum when I was studying coaching science and sports management. It just wasn't part of the curriculum. So I had no skill set other than what I picked up through, luckily landing an internship in the disability sport education program. And that was like this eye-opening kind of opportune sliding doors type of moment, right? Because it exposed me to this whole other aspect of sport that just I didn't really have much of a concept and certainly no confidence and skills around. And so I think, giving these new teachers and these, whether it's sports science or whether it's coaching or whether it's, administration, whatever the kind of pathway people are going down, giving them exposure and giving them skills along the way just reduces that issue of, kind of omitting yourself from inclusive activities because I'm not qualified, right? Sort of that opt-out thing is taken away from you because you've had an exposure and you have some awareness and understanding. So, it's part of the role.
Look, I can also see too that it's like for me personally, it's really just a mindset shift as that entry point because everything else shifts after that. So trying to break down that perception of charity, goodwill, the free and easy win, the overzealous pats on the back for not doing much, the kind of looks down and degrades. And that opening of just shifting that mindset, these future teachers have got so many amazing skills that they'll take it wherever, they want to take it. But that mindset shift goes a really long way to opening up all these other new experiences for themselves, but more importantly also for the students as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And brings to mind, we've been doing some work at my local club at the Bundanoon Rebels, where we've set up our first All Abilities program this year. And I was talking about this with a couple of the other volunteers that have been on the working group to set this up and talking about the fact that, we were looking at what we were doing in these sessions and then comparing that to what we would do in a normal, under 7s, under 8s, under 10s training session or what have you, when we were like, we're literally not doing anything different, right? All we're doing is creating a space where these guys feel comfortable, included, it's accessible, and we're just maybe a little bit more flexible with the way we go about the activities. But fundamentally, they're doing the same stuff. They're doing the same skills. They're doing the same similar drills. They're, scoring goals, passing balls. It's not that different and difficult. And this group includes, a kid who uses a wheelchair, who's non-ambulant, and we've got a whole range of impairments in this cohort that are participating. And we're like, this is like what all our sessions should be looking like, guys. Like we're literally just doing football and we're just being flexible. So it's possible, guys. If you're out there and you're wondering if it's something that you should start doing, absolutely you should. And so what I want to do, I want to change tack a little bit and dig into, Toby, your speed of play kind of idea. But first, you've mentioned it a little bit, your business, your small business that you set up to kind of drive some of this work locally in the Newcastle community. It's called All Ability Sports Coaching. So give me a bit more detail and background around sort of the sort of things you do and deliver as part of All Ability Sports Coaching. And then we'll dig into your models.
Yeah, look, All Ability Sports Coaching, as I said, we kind of started off the back of volunteering and having to wear a couple of different hats. And the idea is to create and provide more local opportunities for our playing cohort. Look, we primarily work with people that live with an intellectual disability, coaching team sports, and we kind of run seasonally around cricket in the summer and our rugby league version of league tag in the winter. And we've been doing that for over 10 years now. Every year we'll have a presentation night and everyone suits up and beers flow and lots of speeches and trophies and things like that and presentation videos. We also do trips away, and that's kind of been consistent when we align with sporting organisation pathways when possible. But when they're not necessarily there, we go and find other all ability communities around the state or around Australia to go and connect to, and we share our models that way. More recently, over the last few years, we've aligned with Cricket NSW Baggy Blues, which is kind of all current and former Blues male and female players. And they've got a wonderful program where they connect with small country towns, or not necessarily small, but all country regional areas to promote mental health awareness and supports. And then within that, they kind of tie in a dinner and a golf day and a twilight T20 match. And we've been able, through Rick McCosker, former Australian and New South Wales cricketing champion, and he's been a beautiful friend and advocate for our community for a long time. He was able to get that segue for us to kind of come in. So when we go to those smaller towns, we'll connect with local service provider and whoever's kind of running or has that kind of housing, a lot of the community within those towns. And we go and connect and promote and show the adaptations. But the beautiful part is we get to bring part of our team with us on every one of those journeys. So for a lot of our trips, it's our players that are being the role models, the peer lead to connect and create those relationships. And we're starting to get to a point where we'll go to some of the towns and the previous places we've been to, they'll travel across to reconnect and get another game of cricket in and start, getting funding for equipment and running it within their programs or their community or to align with the local club for that additional support and facility access. I guess it's probably a big part of what we do at a local level is we align with mainstream sporting clubs, and that's always kind of been our model. So through the mainstream sporting club providing ground facility access, that then offers this connection point and a home base for our community. But it also then opens that pathway for our players as they develop with their confidence and competence in the sport, that there's that entryway into the mainstream sport. So we've got a couple of players with our cricket club at Warrens Bay Cricket Club, playing and having success. They're one of our players that is also in the New South Wales team for people with intellectual disability. Yeah, he scored a 50 on the weekend. So wonderful outcomes off the back of that. But I guess once again, it's that gentle introduction for mainstream clubs. Yeah. A big thing we find is that, and across the board for most things, is when mainstream clubs are charged with the task of having to be inclusive or to run something like that, not knowing where to start, what that looks like, how it sustains all the other metrics around transport and support and adaptations and things like that. So it provides a beautiful way where we get a home and a place that we feel safe and comfortable and included, and we get to join in with their community activities and they can come and join in to ours. And then there's that pathway for those that are at that speed of play level to progress in and play mainstream sport. So that's our general kind of model and what we get up to with all ability sports coaching. We kind of run a day program and a multi-sport life skills team session, which is a lot of fun as well. That kind of really breaks down away from a standard kind of just technical sport skill and being more holistic skills of, turn taking and resetting and being challenged or trying something new, something different, communication. Yeah. So a lot of these other things that transfer into our sports and add value for the players, but they also transfer into wonderful life skills that help them navigate their worlds as well beyond the playing fields.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. And I think, the fact that you've been able to kind of, partner up and connect in with local, mainstream sporting clubs and organizations to create that, both that connection, but also that pathway through, when I'm working with sport organizations on their program design, we have our program planning framework. And one of the key elements of that framework is what I call links, right? And so links is, well, what's the next step for people? And that next step could simply be progressing your skills within the program, or it could be moving from one team to the other. But in this case, you're actually creating a pathway and a link into mainstream sport, as well as the work with the Baggy Blues. You're providing a link and a transition point into community activity, community service, as well as, just connecting with other people in different places and traveling and all these amazing experiences, right? So the fact you've been able to, combine that with sports skill development and sporting experience, is I don't know. It seems like a unique kind of outcome that you've been able to achieve from a disability focused sport service. And it sounds like it's going really, really well.
I think and maybe another part of this that, while we're in that kind of space, thing about mainstream clubs too, there's so many clubs out there that will have players that live with disability and are having success in mainstream sport, and same thing if we're talking about our model, things like that later, there's so many elite level competitors or people that are having success from their junior grades and staying it, and they really enjoy that. And I think that's a wonderful thing too. So we try and promote that where possible, and celebrate that. But there's also this really wonderful thing too, where within our community, we'll have several of our players that will play mainstream sport with another club. So they might so they're not at our local club, but they actually play mainstream rugby league or mainstream cricket for another club. And they'll do that on the Saturday, but on the Sunday mornings, they can come and be part of our community. And that's probably where there's a really wonderful success link there, because maybe in the mainstream community, we're more on the fringe of participation, not for all, but for some, that can be a common thing that we're not necessarily at the same frequency. So some of the jokes or the humor and the communication, as we get up the age groups, it becomes more competitive and more complex. That speed of play increases. So eventually we hit that fringe point where it's no longer enjoyable, or our teammates have less allowance or forgiveness for the errors, and we kind of lose that involvement. And then the common one that we see is it comes to a big semi-final game, and even though they turn up to training twice a week and help out around the club and add so much value in terms of their speed of play, they're prone to letting in a goal or a try or lose a wicket or something, whatever it might be. So they miss out on those opportunities. So having this kind of sliding continuum where we get to have both, it kind of allows those players to continue to engage in mainstream sport, but takes that pressure and emphasis maybe off those pathways to have to try and facilitate that need. They know that they're getting that competitive opportunity or representative opportunities at an all ability level, but at the same time, the skills that they get to develop being a leader within our community go back the other way. So sometimes we've had some that have maybe come in and barely communicate or say boo, and then become a real leader from just knowing and seeing the patterns of the game and being able to help elevate other players up. That also fulfills that self-esteem and confidence. So when they all of a sudden they're going back to their mainstream footy club and the coach is going, hey, what have you done? He's yapping, telling everyone what to do, where to go, and linking in with all the plays. But through an opportunity, a skill can grow and develop, and that belief in that skill can grow and develop, that then can add value in and transfer to other elements of those individual players' lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So let's dig into this speed of play idea, and I might kind of preface it with, I guess, a bit of context around this sort of thing. So in sport in general, obviously, we're using categories to group participants all the time, right? It might be age groups, we categorize by gender, boys, girls, men's, women's, etc. Combat sports, there's weight classes, golf uses handicapping systems. So there's all these ways that we group people to play sport, particularly in team sport. In disability sport, that tends to happen around an impairment generally, and in Paralympic sport, it's very regulated in terms of using assessments to evaluate the impact of impairment on their ability to perform the skills and tactics of their particular sport, and their groups accordingly there as well. But your approach is a little different, right?
Definitely. So look, the speed of play, simplistic context is the speed at which an individual can process incoming information to produce a successful action. All that really frames as task complexity at what level that we're able to experience success in that game, sport, skill, activity, whatever that may be. In a sporting context, that would be player, ball movement, range of movement or adaptability. It can be around the consequence of error, time and space pressure, sequencing of a skill required to be able to contribute to the game and experience success. And when that speed of play is too high, obviously those opportunities close down, common errors start to occur, and we're not able to fulfill that enjoyment of play and participation. We become more in survival mode than thriving mode. When that speed of play is matching for an individual, all of a sudden that play, it's an invitation to play. So we're saying to strategize and communicate and thinking about where I can score my runs or how I could score a try. And it opens up the game in a different way from maybe doing just smaller isolated contributions into something more elaborate and game changing. And I guess that opportunity to truly play the game and fall in love with the game is through that means of speed of play. Speed of play, that's a foundational measure that guides us in everything we're doing, from our interactions and session development and the countless adaptations you'll do within a session or an activity based off certain individuals and the types of feedback you're offering. And I guess the beautiful thing around speed of play, as you mentioned, is that it's not, as a quick premise, it's usually foundational community level, and it wouldn't pass as a model or a classification system for an elite pathways or Paralympic level. But at a community level, it's fantastic. But the beautiful thing within that is an understanding of your player and at what level of complexity can they experience that success. And the wonderful thing in that regard is that we might be a certain level, we might be Division A in one sport, but we might be Division C in another. There might be certain things I've never done before.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to be Division D. So unlike a lot of the other classifications, you're always going to be under 14s for the time that you're 13, 14, or you're always going to be the open women's, if that's the thing. So, and same thing with intellectual disability, if that's the classification and you're not at that top level, you miss out on those opportunities and that purposeful learning and motivation and opportunity. So that's a really interesting element, is that once again, we can be a different speed of play at different things, different sports, but the reality is that we can also at different levels within the same sport. So we've got, for instance, one of our players is on a Division A level for goal kicking. You can slot him from the sideline from anywhere. His running and athletic ability would be more closely aligned to a Division B level, where his passing and receiving the ball was more at a Division C. And then his tagging ability to take tags was actually Division D. So that gives that kind of understanding of the level of support, what we need to work towards, how we reframe those things, and where we position someone to have that opportunity for success, and also where they can contribute to the game. So in an open space in a Division C level game, this man will be a flyer. When the scores are tied at the end of the game and we need someone to kick a conversion, I'd put my hands on it. But
he steps up.
But there's also one, if we can work with him and progress his tagging and being able to watch it all the way into the hand and take those tags off, and with a little bit of body and hand positioning and things like that, and these cues of when to observe or to communicate for passing and receiving, that will help him elevate up into another grade. So I think that's a really important one. And then the other side of things is, and I when I'm teaching at the uni, it's always a fun activity to do, thinking about things like cooking or public speaking, playing chess, playing cards, like everyone's at a different playing pool after half a dozen beers. It's amazing how people move around the different levels of where the confidence and competence lies, of being able to perform under pressure, or with lower confidence and not feeling that they would be able to do that successfully.
So how do you actually go about, I guess, evaluating, assessing where someone falls within the system? And this is probably a double barrel question, is it relative or is it kind of a universal grading? An A is an A in all contexts for a sport, or is it just within the group that you sort of, scale them within the cohort?
Yeah, great.
If that makes sense.
Great question. Look, firstly, in terms of the assessment, it's observational, it's subjective, yet concrete. It's always going to come back to, are we experiencing or have the opportunity to experience success? Anyone that's coaching or working with other people, sometimes we're just not having a good day where, we're in our head or bad night's sleep, or we're hyper focusing on something that we shouldn't be. And that's why we're not performing as well. But in terms of that opportunity to experience success, it'll be evident in what you're observing. We're not trying to dial these things in where someone's got the opportunity to just win all the time, whether they're applying themselves or not. So it's there's a subjective view to that, but it's concrete in terms of whether they're getting the opportunities to participate and contribute or not. And then whether there's lots of common errors occurring. So that's kind of the simplicity of it in that regard. And the reason we use kind of our divisioning through speed of play versus maybe the term ability grouping is that our ability, I personally believe, is more reflective of what is being asked of us. My ability to make toast on a casual Sunday morning with the music playing, and, I've got one child that's not a fussy eater at all. I could burn the thing and it wouldn't be a problem. My ability to make toast is not so much a problem, where for some of the players within our community that maybe have really strict dietary expectations, and, if there's one charred element of it and you've got 20 players around you all asking lots of questions, maybe my ability to make toast looks a bit poor in that moment. And I guess that's the same thing within that sporting context. If someone's lobbing the ball up bowling to you and it's hitting right in your kind of, Goldilocks zone, sweet spot, purple patch, whatever language you want to use, well, it's there to be hit and you nail it and there's no fielder there. It goes straight to the boundary. You look like a champion, but obviously it might be the same, if all of a sudden you're facing someone who's, bowling and they're able to swing the ball or move the ball, or there's a fielder that's really good catching, all of a sudden that success measure changes based off what is being asked of the individual. So that's kind of I guess that bigger view, instead of just maybe looking at the outcome of success or not success, you're also looking at what's being asked in that moment. And that's really, your cue there for, where the positive change or elements need to be made. In terms of an overall sport, we generally come back to that one classification. So the man I mentioned earlier, he's currently at a Division C level. We know there's elements and components there. So I guess in terms of your own understanding as a coach of what the most, if we're not passing and catching a ball in a game of tag footy and we're not making defensive tags, that's not necessarily going to help as much in a game. So to have that success and be able to contribute to the game and the team, we're going to be back at a Division C level. But once those skills develop, the fact that he can do some of those other things really, really well means he'll be able to add value at a Division B level as he progresses up. So it'll generally come back to that one goal.
Yeah.
And the reality is that within any community, we don't have the perfect community in a sense where every week we're going to have a game of Division A, game of Division B, C, and D. But often, in every community, I'm sure similar to your soccer pro, football program at the moment, you're going to get that spread of ability levels that would span across those ones. But that's where it's so important to be understanding of that speed of play concept, because then you're more aware of, instead of trying to elevate everyone up to that elite level or that, that Division A kind of representative level, we're just looking at that little change that we can be making to be able to contribute and influence the outcome of the game at that next step, wherever they might be. So that's even within a smaller program. And then same thing when you have a game and you've got a mix of ability or speed of play levels within the same game, it helps to be able to reframe for our players, because sometimes we get really used to having a lot of success because we are the top of the food chain in a certain, maybe in a day program or from sport at school or something like that, where all of a sudden they're coming in and they're a Division B player, but now they're playing with a lot of Division A's because that's just where the mix is in your group at that time. You can help reframe that, how they're being asked more of them and in these kind of ways, and how they're holding their own with these kind of elements, and maybe by improving these skills, they'll be able to contribute to the game or be involved in the game in a greater capacity, and vice versa. When someone gets an easy win because they're a Division B player and they're a Division C and D game, that we can extend them by, working more on their communication and maybe strategic play and positioning versus just catching the ball and running around everyone to score several times.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating approach, and I think it gives participants an opportunity to understand and identify where they can improve and progress, even within just their own skill acquisition and skill development, which I think is something that, particularly in community sport, is just something that really doesn't happen. We don't give that kind of feedback and opportunity to kids, particularly in team sports, where, we kind of just expect them to listen to what the coach says at training and then execute it on the weekend, and everybody should be at the same level and we should be getting success that way. And any community coach, volunteer community coach on a Saturday morning, whether it's on the soccer pitch or the league tag pitch or, whatever, will look at a team and know that you've got kids from, this level of capability all the way through to, in your case, you probably got a D kid and an A kid all in the same team and everything in between, but they're stuck in their age group together and they're kind of expected to all operate at the same level and be trained in the same way, and they're not really given that feedback other than the outcome of the game on the weekend. And that isn't necessarily helpful in all situations. I mean, I look at the kids that are coming through, even in our little club locally, and you might have in any given season, the under 12s team where you've got half the team who've played since they were 5 years old and they've developed the skills and they understand the game. And then you've got the kid who's just turned up for the first time. And physically they might be on par and maturity wise, they might be on par, but understanding skill, tactics, they're polar opposites, right? But we expect them to fit in, and we don't really consider the differences and how we need to develop and coach these individuals within the group. And sometimes that means kids miss out on the joy and opportunity for having success because the framework isn't there for them. And this sounds like a really interesting tool that maybe could be applied more broadly in regular sport, I think.
I could see that. Yeah, that would definitely be a more positive outcome for more players.
Yeah.
I'll say as well, like I said, the big one is, or the beautiful part is we're not fixed in that one division. So coaching and training and positive experience, some of our players, they will progress up that division or that speed of play level in time. For others that may be starting younger, I've got my two children that play and they're starting in Division D at that foundational level, but eventually they'll progress up into C and then B and then A, as most young ones will progress up to that are exposed to sport and opportunities and feedback. But the other beautiful part of our community is that it's not disability specific. And I think that it disarms a lot of this, the framing of our language, whether it's Division A, B, C or D, because we've got mainstream players that will come into our community that will be at those A, B, C and D levels. I often share my mother-in-law coming and playing league tag and never played a lot of sport and never played footy in her life. And she's a grandmother, but brilliant, does a brilliant job in Division D. And after the first season, she had to progress up into Division C. It wasn't that she was kind of running quicker and putting a chip and chase over the top and scooting through, dominating the game. But it was more that she did learn things of the game, of kind of where to stand and the processes and what was happening, to the point that she could contribute and strategically be a bit more advantaged by that. So I think that's another really big one as well. Sometimes our general mobility can be that inhibitor. So we've got some that are really strategic and will pick apart the game, but they're always going to be at that more foundational Division C or D level, based off the restrictions or limitations. But over the span of the 5-10 years that we get to work with them, they get to learn that game model inside out and really strategically. And it's once again, it's a pleasure to get to watch and facilitate as a coach.
No, it's awesome. I think I'm going to have to organise to come and see it in action so I can understand it a little bit more. Toby, we are fast approaching our wrap-up time. and I do want to give the opportunity to do our quickfire questions. All right. So are you ready for this? I think we're going to need to do them in record time if we can. So are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So who's your favorite athlete right now?
Our first player we ever coached, Mitch Skipper Jennings, absolute champion of a human being. I've coached him since 2013, 2014, and he's been along for the ride, but he's had so much value to our community, and he's just the cornerstone. He's part of the furniture. Every player loves him, and he just tried his heart out, and he's cheeky as anything, so he gives as good as he gets, but very fortunate that he was our first player to be always instilling that
awesome.
stand and that value. So he's always going to be my favourite over when I was younger. Terry Lamb for rugby league, Justin Langer for cricket when I was younger. But yeah, Mitch Skipper Jennings, my number one.
Mitch Skipper Jennings, got to have a bit of banter in sport. It's a given. What about teams? Favorite sport team?
Yeah, I'm the Bulldogs fan in rugby league, NRL, and I guess
we won't hold that against you.
Yeah, look, I'm only starting to kind of mention that I'll I'll kind of stay positive for a good 10 years. But look, I've always been that one ever since I was a little fella. And I said all the people out at Hayward remember me just getting around in a Bulldogs jersey. I'm pretty sure for most of my upbringing. But, and then I guess the cricket sides. I love the Australian cricket side and the Blues in any sports. I guess you gotta love and represent.
Yeah, well, I can't talk. I'm a Newcastle Knights fan as well, so it's a tough team to support, as is the Doggies at the moment. But that's all right. All right, what's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning? This is an insightful one. Usually,
mate, I'd love to say I go for a 10K run and a swim, but it's generally a pupper straight into the office. I'm a very creative person. I'm a musician and run a small business and preparing for work. And I said, I need that extra time for planning before the kids wake up. So that's generally my go-to. Up and into the office. I've got a pretty cool office in that regard. So I'm pretty lucky in it.
Yeah, it's good. I totally get it. You got to find those moments to do the admin work when you work for yourself. So I feel you on that one. What about your greatest sporting achievement? This could be on or off the field. Is there something top of mind?
More coaching. If I went really quickly, I reckon getting to coach Australian cricket team and getting a baggy green, that was pretty cool. Beating coaching sides that beat Queensland, Victoria and South Australia is pretty good. But really, when the captain, we have our all-ability teams play in mainstream competitions, and when our teams win against the mainstream team, that's always... We've had that happen several times across our different sports. It's just such a magical...
That's great.
And it's not about dominating. It's just showing and highlighting the capability and the gentle education and the humility in which our players always do that in is just, heartwarming and, reminds us why we do what we do.
Yeah, and totally validating for the approach that you're taking with the teams as well. When you can hold your own in standard mainstream sport, that's a really great outcome. That's awesome. All right, this is the last one, arguably the most important one. What's your best inclusion tip to leave with our listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, look, I'd have to say, what makes you great is not that you get it right all the time, but when it's not working, you look for the answers. And I think that's just a powerful one for our players and for future teachers. Is we're allowed to make mistakes, and if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying. But when it's not working, obviously you got to look for the answers. And those that do that more often are going to see progressions within their programs and initiatives. For those that kind of stand back and perceive it as, this is a participation, tick a box, here we go, then obviously it's going to stay at that level. So I think also asking those questions in reflection and review of...
Yeah, be curious, right?
Yeah, be curious. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity and your time, Woodsy. Love your work.
No, it's been great to talk to you and dig into. There's plenty more we could talk about, I'm sure, particularly around that categorization model, that speed of play model. But before we close out, do you want to share with our listeners how they can get in touch with you or learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, look, probably Toby Kable on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to reach out, connect. we can go from there. And our world's starting to open up a lot more with International Federation of Adapted Physical Activity. I'm the new Oceania representative, so definitely on.
Yes, actually, congratulations on your appointment. It's a great organisation. I'll drop some links in the show notes to sort of share it with anyone that's interested in learning more about that. But yeah, well done. Congratulations. It's a big job.
Yeah. Well, I think just starting to learn more. So obviously if people are reaching out, if they're doing adapted physical activity initiatives across anything for any particular reason or disability focus area, I'd love to hear and learn about it and to promote the wonderful things that you're doing or the research side of it. So but yeah, that's best way, probably through LinkedIn, mate.
All right, too easy. We'll drop all the relevant links in the show notes as well as all of the notes from today. Toby Kable, thank you so much for joining me on the Sport is for Everybody podcast today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it. Have a great one.